I never thought I'd be the kind of person to order something from the dark web. But one late night, boredom got the better of me. I was scrolling through some shady websites, and that's when I stumbled upon a listing for a mystery box. The description promised it would contain unique, one-of-a-kind items perfect for someone looking for a thrill. I'd seen plenty of stories online about people ordering from the dark web, and while most ended in regret, I was determined to find out for myself what all the fuss was about. So, I clicked the order button, convinced that whatever was inside would at least be interesting enough to break up my mundane routine. After all, I told myself, it's just a box of random stuff. What could possibly go wrong? When it finally arrived a week later, I was both excited and apprehensive. I ripped open the cardboard packaging and pulled out the box. It was a plain, unmarked cardboard box, the kind you'd get from a warehouse. Inside, nestled in crumpled paper, were several items: an old pocket watch, a rusty key, a faded photograph of a woman, and a small notebook filled with haphazard scrawls. At first glance, they seemed harmless, even intriguing. I examined the pocket watch. It looked antique, but it didn't work. The key was heavy, ornate, and the photograph was of a young woman with long brown hair, her face partially obscured. I felt a twinge of unease as I studied her expression. It seemed sad. The notebook, on the other hand, was filled with strange notes and random phrases, but one name stood out: Rachel Thompson. Curiosity consumed me. I did a quick search online and discovered that Rachel Thompson had gone missing a few years back in my area. The details were sparse, but I learned she had last been seen at a local bar, and her disappearance had sent shockwaves through the community. A sense of dread settled in my stomach as I realized I now possessed something that belonged to a missing person. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to shake the feeling that the items in that box were connected to something sinister. My mind raced with questions. Who had sent this box? Why me? Was there something more to Rachel's story? I knew I should have just tossed everything back in the box and forgotten about it, but I couldn't help myself. I had to know more. The next day, I decided to dig deeper. I went to the local library, searching for any information on Rachel's case. I spent hours sifting through old newspapers, piecing together fragments of her story. The deeper I went, the more disturbed I became. It turned out Rachel wasn't the only one. There were several other missing persons cases, all linked to the same area, all women who had vanished without a trace. As I skimmed through article after article, I noticed a disturbing trend. Most of the women had been last seen at night, often leaving a bar or a party. They were all in their 20s, vibrant and full of life, just like Rachel. It was as if there was a predator lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That's when I found a name I recognized. One of the women in the articles was in the photograph I'd received in the mystery box. I felt sick as I connected the dots. It was becoming clear that the items in the box were not just random trinkets, they were evidence of something much darker. Determined to uncover the truth, I started to keep a journal. Each entry detailed my findings, and I began to form a timeline of Rachel's last known movements. Days turned into weeks, and my obsession grew. I became fixated on the idea of finding Rachel, as if solving the mystery of her disappearance could somehow free her spirit. I began to lose track of time, of my friends, and of my own well-being. Then, one evening, I received a message on my phone from an unknown number. The message was simple: stop looking. My heart raced as I stared at the screen, a chill running down my spine. I shrugged it off as a prank, but deep down, I knew it wasn't just a coincidence. Someone wanted me to stop digging. But I couldn't stop. I was too far in, too entangled in the web of secrets that surrounded Rachel's case. I began to feel like I was being watched. Shadows lurked in the corners of my vision, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end whenever I left my apartment. The nights grew longer and darker, the walls of my tiny apartment seeming to close in on me. I barely slept, too afraid of what I might discover if I did. One night, I decided to confront my fears. I grabbed the items from the mystery box and drove to the bar where Rachel was last seen. It was a small, dingy place, the kind of spot that seemed to cling to secrets like a moth to a flame. I walked in, trying to project an air of confidence, but my stomach churned as I looked around. The bar was dimly lit, filled with the smoky scent of alcohol and regret. I approached the bartender and asked about Rachel. He hesitated, his expression darkening as he leaned closer. "You shouldn't be asking about her," he warned, glancing nervously around. "Bad things happen to people who dig too deep." Ignoring his warning, I pressed on. "What do you mean? What happened to her? Just drop it." "Okay, you don't want to get involved in that mess," he replied, his voice low and urgent. Frustrated, I left the bar, but as I walked back to my car, I felt a presence behind me. I turned, but no one was there. My heart raced as I fumbled for my keys, feeling the prickling sensation of being followed. I drove home in a daze, my mind replaying the bartender's warning. That night, I sat in my apartment, restless. I pulled out the pocket watch and examined it closely. There was something odd about it, almost like a code hidden in the engravings. My fingers traced the patterns and suddenly, the watch clicked open. Inside, a small piece of paper slipped out, crumpled and worn. I unfolded it, my breath hitching in my throat. It was a list of names, all crossed out except for one: Rachel Thompson. Underneath her name was an address. A wave of nausea hit me. I knew I had to go there. I had to confront whatever was waiting for me. The next day, I drove to the address listed on the note. It was an old house on the outskirts of town, overgrown with weeds and shrouded in mystery. My heart pounded as I stepped out of the car, dread curling in my stomach. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay, the sky a murky gray overhead. I approached the front door, which hung slightly ajar. I pushed it open, revealing a dusty interior filled with silence. The air was thick, and the floor creaked beneath my feet as I stepped inside. My instincts screamed at me to turn back, but I pressed on. I moved through the house, taking in the decay and neglect, until I found myself in the basement. A shiver ran down my spine as I descended the creaking stairs, the air growing colder with each step. At the bottom, I found a small room, dimly lit by a flickering bulb. And there, in the center, was a chair. My breath caught in my throat. Tied to the chair was a figure, a woman, her face hidden behind a mask. I froze, realizing that this was no ordinary kidnapping. This was part of something much more sinister. "Help me," she cried, her voice muffled. "Please." I rushed forward, my heart racing, but before I could untie her, the door slammed shut behind me. The lights flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. Panic surged as I fumbled for my phone, desperate to illuminate the chaos surrounding me. Suddenly, a voice echoed in the dark, a low, menacing laugh. "You should have stayed away," it whispered, reverberating off the walls. "You've played right into our hands." I felt a surge of fear as I spun around, searching for the source of the voice. But the darkness was thick, swallowing everything. The woman in the chair was screaming, thrashing against her bindings. I could feel the presence of something sinister, lurking just out of sight. "Who are you?" I shouted, my voice trembling. "What do you want?" The figure stepped out of the shadows, revealing a face obscured by a mask, a grotesque amalgamation of features stitched together, a nightmarish visage that sent chills down my spine. "You're here for a reason, just like her. This is a game, and you're the next player." I backed away, my mind racing. I couldn't let this happen. I had to escape. I lunged for the door, but it wouldn't budge. I could hear the figure's footsteps closing in, the sound echoing in my ears. "Help me," the woman cried again, desperation lacing her voice. In a surge of panic, I swung my fists, connecting with the figure's face. It stumbled back, and I seized the moment to break free, darting toward the door. As I burst out into the hallway, I didn't stop running. I sprinted up the stairs, adrenaline pumping through my veins. I needed to find a way out. I burst through the front door, the fresh air hitting my face like a wave of relief. But as I turned to run, I saw the figure standing on the porch, blocking my escape. "You can't run," it taunted, stepping forward. "The game has only just begun." I sprinted past it, the fear propelling me forward. I could hear it chasing me, the sound of heavy footsteps behind me. I raced to my car, fumbling for my keys, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I finally found them and jumped inside, locking the doors just in time. As I started the engine, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The figure was standing in the road, watching me with that same eerie grin. I felt a shiver of dread wash over me. I drove for hours, the landscape blurring past, trying to put as much distance between me and the nightmare I had stumbled into. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched, that the game was far from over. When I finally pulled over at a gas station, I stepped inside, desperate for a moment to breathe. I grabbed a coffee, my hands still shaking, and approached the cashier. "Are you okay?" she asked, concern etched on her face. I forced a smile, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. I paid quickly and stepped outside, but my heart dropped as I saw a figure leaning against my car. The mask. It was there, waiting for me. I turned to run back inside, but it was too late. The figure grabbed my shoulder, pulling me back into the darkness. I screamed, but no one came to my aid. "Shh," it whispered, its voice chillingly calm. "You've played the game long enough. It's time for you to join the others." I felt hopelessness wash over me. I was trapped in a nightmare with no way out, and deep down, I knew the truth. I was just another piece in their sick game. As the darkness closed in around me, I realized the horrifying reality I would never escape. The game had claimed another player. Suddenly, a flash of pain pierced my side. I looked down to see a knife glinting in the dim light. The masked figure had stabbed me, and I stumbled backward, clutching my wound. I felt my strength waning as I hit the ground. "Why?" I gasped, struggling to remain conscious. The figure leaned closer, its grotesque mask inches from my face. "You think you're the first? You're nothing more than a pawn in a game that has been going on for years. We've been watching you, waiting for the right moment to strike." I felt a surge of anger, even as darkness encroached on my vision. "You won't get away with this," I managed to say, the weight of my words hanging in the air. "Oh, but we already have," it sneered, before stepping back into the shadows. "Welcome to the game, Rachel." With that, everything went dark.